I know you have. I know you have. Brilliant. Can I just make a couple of wee remarks about the introduction, because actually I've had the privilege of being elected to Glasgow City Council from a jail cell, which is the only politician in Scotland that's been elected while he was in jail. I've got the pleasure of having been elected to the reforming of the Scottish Parliament, the first one, the first reforming in 1999. And I've had the pleasure of representing Hope Over Fear and a whole number of other organisations over many, many years. But you know, the proudest position I've ever held was at Stirling University. And it happened because when the miners' strike kicked off, and any of you who have got any relationship with the area will know that the strike started in March of 1984 in the rest of the UK, but it started in February in Scotland because Flynn was the first pit to walk out, and it was virtually unanimous, which is why there was a wee bit of inaccuracy in what was said, because when we were picketing, we didn't go anywhere near Flynn, because that was 100%. It was Castle Bridge and a few of the other Fife pits that we actually visited on the picket line. But when we started, when we used to get some of the students up from the Labour Club in those days to go down to the Stirling Miners' Welfare, we had to get them up at 5 in the morning, because we had to get to Stirling Miners' Welfare at 5:30 in the morning to get on the buses, to get to all the pits for 7 in the morning to make sure we were on the picket lines. And for the first few weeks, I always remember that a lot of the miners were a wee bit suspicious, you know, you bloody students, you know. But we get talking away, and I made some fantastic friends. We Pat Gavin, Tam McGee, great young men, young fighters, young miners who were involved in the first strike. And you know, after 4 weeks, maybe 3, proud as Punch I was, when at the Miners' Welfare they had a meeting and they voted to take the bus every morning to Stirling Uni to pick us up, so that we didn't have to come down into the Stirling Miners' Welfare. We had showed our consistency, we had showed that we weren't just Johnny-come-latelys, we had showed that we were committed to supporting the picket. And I've got to say, having been a student for 4 years at that time, I never ate better in my 4 years than I did during the miners' strike, because after the picket, of course, we get taken back for breakfast, then we would go into a wee afternoon picket, and we get taken back for lunch, and what you had was the human solidarity of the working class areas, not just of Stirling but through the whole of Scotland, that made sure the miners and their families were well cared for, were fed properly, and weren't starved back to work by that bastard Thatcher, who was trying her damnedest to screw the miners into the ground. And that was a great political awakening for me, and I'm sure for many other people. And I got my most proudest electoral moment when the Labour Club elected me the picket bus organiser. Picket bus organiser. That was it. I was, nothing in politics could change after that. That was my proudest moment. Some of you lived through that strike. You will know from your own experiences that the description that Arthur Scargill later gave to it was absolutely correct. It was a civil war without bullets. It was a civil war that the British establishment waged against the trade union movement as a whole, but they knew they had to take on the generals of the trade union movement, the leaders of the trade union movement in the shape of the National Union of Mine Workers, and they had to break them. They had to break them in order to get away with their welfare cuts, in order to get away with their trade union reforms, in order to get away with the privatisation of all of the resources that used to belong to ordinary working class people. Thatcher and her crew, remember the Ridley plan, they prepared, they built up the stocks of the coal, they made sure they got the trade unions broke within the haulage companies, they privatised the haulage companies, they made sure they switched a lot of the power stations from reliance on coal to reliance on gas. They prepared meticulously. Only problem is, the people that were supposed to lead the working class didn't prepare meticulously. The TUC, who at that time had the ability to organise 10 million workers, was so meek and moderate that they let the miners fight on their own, which was a damn disgrace to the eternal shame of the likes of Norman Willis and co, who was a leader of the TUC at the time. Regardless of being left on their own, however, for 12 long months the miners fought, and sure they had to go back to the work without a victory. But I remember one of the South Wales banners as they marched back to the pit with a pipe band, and one of the South Wales miners' banners read, "This is the end of the beginning." And of course what it was trying to illustrate was the British state had been exposed for what it was. Class warfare was back on the agenda. The people like Blair and co, who in later years used to say, "Oh, don't talk about the class war, it's outmoded, it's out-fashioned." I used to always make the point, the people who don't want to talk about class warfare are too busy executing class warfare. That's why they don't want to talk about it. And as far as I'm concerned, that whole episode of my life taught me that we live in a very, very divided society. We look now, brothers and sisters, we look now as we approach tomorrow the anniversary of a historic vote as far as Scotland was concerned. The opportunity that we had in our hands to break the British state, to break Westminster and its iron grip on politics, its ability to introduce politics of division, politics of poverty, politics which is always about looking after the rich and the powerful at the expense of the rest. We had the chance last year to break that, and unfortunately we missed that opportunity. And for some people they would then say, well, why have you got a rally on Saturday in George Square to celebrate that particular referendum? Why celebrate a defeat? Well, brothers and sisters, I'll tell you why I think it's worth celebrating. Because although we lost, there is an awful lot that we have to celebrate. Because what happened in the course of that referendum campaign was the British establishment mobilised everything at its disposal. It mobilised the press, it mobilised the broadcast media. The British Biased Corporation was exposed tooth and nail for being wedded to the British state and their biased and ridiculous reporting of that campaign. We had them getting people like Obama coming out and saying, oh well, it would be good for America if people stayed united in Britain. We had the Chinese Prime Minister getting brought into the debate. We had the royal family getting brought into the debate. We even had Simon Bloody Cowell getting brought into the debate. All mobilised to try and convince the people of Scotland that it was wrong, that we weren't big enough, that we weren't rich enough, that we weren't smart enough to do what over 200 other small countries in the world do, run their own bloody affairs, run their own. We're no smart enough. For goodness sakes, our record of innovation, our record for development, for manufacturing, for medicinal developments is absolutely second to none across the planet, but we're not smart enough. We've got some of the best universities in the planet. We're not rich enough. For goodness sakes, did they not look at the figures? For 33 years in a row. You know, see if it was 3 years in a row. See if it was 2 years in a row. You could understand why they would say it's a flash in the pan. 33 years in a row, Scotland's paid more into the Westminster coffers than we've got back for the Westminster coffers. But we're not rich enough to run our own affairs. How ridiculous. But what they did was they mobilised the fear factor. They mobilised the fear factor. Tesco's is going to close. Asda's going to leave. The Royal Bank of Scotland's going to shut up shop. The pensions won't get paid. The pensioners will lose their entitlements. And of course it was a lot of garbage. It was a lot of lies and deceit was effective. It was effective. You think of what happened a week ago, last year, when the Cameron had to pull all of the generals of industry into number 10 and whip them into order, because the week before that there'd been an opinion poll that showed Yes was winning. Yes was winning. So he whipped them all into line. You must get out there and you must spread fear. You must spread alarm. We had examples of the shipyards sending out thousands of letters to their employees. Oh, if you vote yes, then you could be redundant within a few months. You had trade unions, to their eternal shame, trade unions, the Union of Communication Workers and others, USDA, sending letters to their members saying it is in your interest to vote no in the referendum to keep the British establishment together. Brothers and sisters, despite that, despite all of that, I recall being invited into the studio at the heart of the beast on the night of the referendum, sitting beside that oxymoron. How else can you describe a Labour Lord? That's an oxymoron. A Labour Lord. You shouldn't have a Labour Lord. For goodness sakes, how can you be Labour and a Lord? You can be a Tory, aye, a Liberal, aye, but a Labour Lord. That's an oxymoron. And of course I was sitting with one of them, John Bloody Reid. Do you remember during the referendum campaign, it was like the four horsemen of the apocalypse, wasn't it? Bummer George Robertson, wee Jack McConnell, he was at the university with us, same university. Remember wee Jack when he used to say he was against the establishment until he joined the bloody establishment. John Reid, they all got together, him and his wee band of crew. Oh, there'll be absolute disaster if you vote yes in this referendum. And of course, what they were really doing, they couldn't give a damn about the poor or Stenhousemuir or any other part of Scotland. What they cared about was their own jobs. Because if we had voted yes last year, they'd have been getting their P45s and the House of Lords would be getting closed. That's the reality. That's why they were so keen to campaign for a no vote. And I was sitting beside him in his wee smirky face. And Glenn Campbell was the anchor man in the studio that night, and he was about to come to me to ask me my opinion of the votes that had come in by then. And to be honest, by the time the first vote came in, it was clear. We knew we were going to lose that first vote, but it was the gap that we'd lost by that became clear that we weren't going to win that night. What wasn't clear yet was how many votes we were going to get. And wee Glenn said, I'm going to come to Tommy Sheridan, but first of all, we've got a tweet from the Labour leader in Scotland, Joanne Lamont. Well, he actually says Joanne Lamont, but I'm saying Joanne Lamont. And of course, the wee tweet was to the effect, great victory for Scottish Labour tonight. Great victory for Scottish Labour tonight. And he came to me after that tweet, says, Mr. Sheridan, what do you think? Joanne Lamont's calling it a victory for Scottish Labour. And I said, go back and check it, I said, she and the rest of her crew should go home tonight and look up the term Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhic victory. It was devised from a military general during the Greek wars, a general who, in the course of trying to win one particular battle, expended so many of his troops to win that battle, he ended up losing the overall war. It became known as a Pyrrhic victory after that general. Brothers and sisters, Labour, by uniting with the Tories and the Liberals and the billionaires and the millionaires and the UKIPs of the world, by dancing with them and sipping the champagne in celebration that night, they may have won the battle of the referendum, but they have lost the war for the hearts and the minds of the people of Scotland. That is an absolute reality. And it was my absolute determination after that result to celebrate 1.6 million people in Scotland, 1.6 million, had the courage, had the vision to stand up to the bully boys in London, to stand up to the BBC, to stand up to the Royal Bank and make the point, you're not going to be closing in an independent Scotland, because the only banks that will be closing will be the food banks. That's the only things that will be closing in an independent Scotland. With 1.6 million Scots who had the courage to stand up to that, 45% of the Scottish population had that courage and that vision. Brothers and sisters, that's worth celebrating. That's worth celebrating. And what's even more worth celebrating is everything that's happened since. You look at the psychological breakdown, the analysis of the vote. What does it tell you? Yes, there are some differences and some nuances. But generally speaking, what did that vote tell you? That vote told you if you were young and working class, you were for yes. That's what it told you. If you were relatively well off and older, you were no. Of course, because the media preyed on the elderly, preyed on the insecurity, tried to spread fear and alarm. It had an effect. There's no doubt about that. The vow coming out in the final week. Don't worry, you don't need to vote yes. We will give you all these new powers anyway. Where was the purdah on campaigning, by the way? Where was the purdah on campaigning, trying to influence the outcome of elections that everybody else is supposed to observe? But they were so desperate that they come out with this big vow, using the Daily Record to promote it, using Gordon Brown, the mouthpiece of the establishment, and it had an effect. What's happened since is a large percentage of those who voted no have realised how wrong they were, have realised how much they were duped, how much they were lied to, and admit that they felt bullied, that they thought they were going to lose their pension, that they thought the economy was going to collapse. I remember the final weekend, I remember turning on the BBC, and I couldn't believe this story. Some of you might have seen it. Deutsche Bank representative on the BBC. We have carried out an analysis. If the people of Scotland vote yes for independence, there will be a new European-wide depression. I'm watching this and I'm saying, what a lot of garbage. And yet it was getting given airtime, given credibility by the British Bias Corporation. That's the type of things that we were trying to compete with. And yet, we still managed to secure 45% of the population. My opinion, and I'm glad it's now been backed up with opinion polls, because I've been saying this for months, my opinion is we now have a majority. We now have a majority who, if you had a referendum tomorrow, would vote yes. I remember the Edinburgh University never got much coverage. Edinburgh University did some serious research among 10,000, usually opinion polls you're looking for, there's 1,000 consulted, 10,000. And according to Edinburgh University research, they believed around 60% of the Scottish population were for yes. And now you look at the figures, not only do we have 53% saying definitely yes, but we also have over 80% of the population saying it's inevitable. It's inevitable. Even those who are no know that they are in the increasing minority, because the young and the working class are committed to the idea that we should run our own affairs. By the way, that doesn't mean we'll get it all right. we need to be given the opportunity to make our own mistakes. I want to be able to move away from blaming Westminster for everything. I want to be able to do things that Scotland believes we should do. And if we get it wrong, put our hands up and say, we got that one wrong. But we got it wrong. I want to have this democratic right, this one single democratic right to get the government we vote for. Now, is that revolutionary? To get the government we vote for. Is it too much to ask in the 21st century? Come on. And when people say about the second referendum, you know, I'm very committed to a second referendum. We can't have it next year because there's Scottish Parliament elections. We can't have it in 2017 because there's local government elections, and there's also possibly a European referendum. But you know what? 2018. There's nothing down for 2018. And you know what we could do? We could get each of the pro-independence political parties who are standing next year seeking election to the Scottish Parliament to have in their manifestos, a vote for us is a vote for a second referendum. And if those parties combined are able to return a majority to the Scottish Parliament, brothers and sisters, that's a democratic mandate for a second referendum. That's what you call democracy. I believe we should try and get all of the political parties that believe in independence to say loud and clear that one of the manifesto platforms that we're standing on in 2016 is Indy Ref 2. A vote for us is a vote for a second referendum. That would give us the opportunity to hold that referendum in 2018. Some people want it sooner, and I can understand why. Others are saying, oh, we're not ready. Wait till we've got 60%, 65%. Wait till we're sure we're going to win. I've got to say to you, brothers and sisters, I don't think there is such a thing as a certainty that you're going to win. It's like getting into the boxing ring. You never ever know for sure whether you're going to win. But what you do know for sure is, see, if you don't go in, you're never going to win. You're never going to win. And what gets me now, you know, what gets me is, I listen to the voices that are saying, wait. And I'm more and more angry that a lot of those voices, I mean, one of them I read today, I'm not saying this is representative of all the voices, but one of them I read today, Tom Hunter. And maybe it's in his description, billionaire Tom Hunter, who is saying that we need to put it all behind us now, that we don't need another referendum, we need to forget that, put it away for a generation, he said. I think he said 30 years. I'm trying to remember, it was the Indy that I read. And I'm thinking to myself, do you know, see those who are saying, wait, they tend to be the ones who've got a nice job, decent house, quite comfortable, and they aren't really the victims of what these bastards are doing down in Westminster. They aren't really the victims of the benefit cuts, of the tax credit cuts. They aren't really the victims of poverty pay. They aren't really the victims of the food banks. They aren't really the victims of this benefit sanctions. See, quite frankly, I'm not prepared to wait longer than 2018 because the victims are suffering now. They need something to have some hope on. They need something to hold on to. And I think they can hold on to the thought that, okay, it's still 2-3 years away, but there is something in the horizon that if we can hold our own just now, fight the cuts, fight against poverty pay, try and ameliorate what the Tories are doing with a vengeance, then we can vote for our independence and we can get rid of all of that nonsense. That is something for people to hang on to. But see, without that, what are the victims of Tory austerity got to hold on to? Because the truth is, and the SNP in particular are going to have to face up to this. The truth is, the SNP won an absolute stunning result in May. Stunning result. Political earthquake. And that political earthquake was based, in my opinion, on support for independence. And anybody who says it wasn't, come on! The SNP's whole reason d'etre, reason for existence, is independence. You can't very well say, I voted SNP, but I don't really want independence. Come on! Part of that victory was clearly support for independence. But another part of the victory was opposition to austerity cuts. was a recognition that the SNP were saying quite clearly that they weren't going to implement the Tory austerity cuts. Brothers and sisters, they won 56 out of the 59 MPs. I've got to say to you, I don't want to be harsh if there are any Green Party supporters in here tonight, but I've got to say to you, I'm disappointed. Disappointed in the Green Party. I think it was the right thing to do. My own political party, Solidarity, we had a conference in February, and a number of our members wanted to stand in the general election, stand candidates on a socialist programme of opposition to Tory austerity, independence and socialism. That was the cry from our rank and file. And by the way, I'm not going to disparage them for that. That's what we stand for. Of course you would expect them to call for that. But in the circumstances of a general election where you've only got one vote, I think it was madness. I think it was political sectarianism to stand in an election where you've only got one vote and risk the maximising of the yes vote and the anti-austerity vote to get rid of not just the blue Tories and the yellow Tories, but to get rid of the red Tories as well. I think it was important to stand aside and to call for the people of Scotland to unite behind the SNP. We called it lend your vote to the SNP. Some people were already SNP supporters, that's fine. Others had never ever voted SNP. We called the people, lend your vote to the SNP on a pro-independence, anti-austerity, anti-Trident platform. I think that was the right thing to do. We lost members. Unfortunately, we lost about 30-40 people left our party because they thought we were giving too many concessions to nationalism and that we weren't socialist any longer. I'm not going to have a go at them. They're good comrades. I think they're politically wrong, but they're entitled to their opinions. You know what? I spoke down in Dumfries for an absolutely fantastic candidate, a woman who was a serving nurse and would have been a tremendous MP. She lost by some 700 votes. The Greens stood in that election and took 800 votes. Where's the sense in that? Where was the sense in standing to get 800 votes and effectively... Somebody said taxi for Sheridan.